Today we're going to talk a little bit about the Chief Scouts Bronze Award. Now, this is one of the series of awards in Scouting known as the Chief Scouts Awards. They are the highest awards that someone can achieve in their respective sections, and this is the second of several different types of these awards. The previous one being the Acorn Award, Chief Scouts Acorn Award for squirrels, and the one after being the Chief Scouts Silver Award for cubs. These types of awards, the Chief Scouts Bronze Award is the one we're covering today, are considered harder to achieve than other awards within the same section. Rather than activity badges, which usually take 1 or 2 evenings to complete, the Chief Scouts Awards consist of a number of challenge awards or challenge badges that you have to get as prerequisites first, and each of those may take a more extended period of time to reach. However, achieving the Chief Scouts Award of the section you belong to is considered to be essentially having completed your time, had the best possible experience you could have had inside that section. So any leaders who are listening to this, try and build your programs around achieving the Chief Scouts Awards, because it's a good litmus test for having the Beaver Scouts or whichever section you belong to, of having a full and varied scouting experience essentially. So the Bronze Award here, once achieved, can be worn on the Cub Scout uniform until such time as the Silver Chief Scout Silver Award has been achieved, and it is one of the more primary sort of awards that sets people up for a successful time in scouting in the more senior sections of Cubs and Scouts, and then later on into even Explorers, where they earn those King Scouts Awards and other exciting experiences and useful qualifications, such as the Gold Duke of Edinburgh's Award, which is very important for things like university applications later in life. So if you're a parent listening to this, that's the main reason, one of the main reasons why you want your child to be in scouting in general, is to basically have a good and varied sort of adventurous experience, learning those leadership skills, those teamworking skills, those life skills, being a good self-starter and being able to be independent to some extent, and then later in life, in the more senior sections of scouting, get those externally recognised awards like the King Scout Award, which are recognised by universities and employers to give that little bit of an extra edge for a good time away learning stuff outside the house essentially. So the requirements for the Chief Scouts Bronze Award are relatively similar to the other ones inside the Chief Scouts Award scheme. Basically, it consists of completing a number of different challenge awards or challenge badges. As you can see here, there are a number, there's around 6 of them. This is a step up from, I believe, the 4 that are in the Acorn Award, and all of these are more involved than the ones in the Acorn Award that the Squirrels go for, but they're not as difficult as the ones that are in the Silver or the Gold Award in the more senior sections. Additionally, a Beaver Scout has to complete 4 different activity badges. These are those circular ones that are on the left sleeve of the uniform. These can be a variety of different things, but essentially activity badges are given for what are usually 1 night or 2 nights of experience, trying a different thing, trying something new, rounding out that young person's experiences and opening them up to new sort of opportunities and potential hobbies that they may have never considered before. This also includes what are known as staged badges, such as first aid and things like that, which are maintain and persist throughout your time in scouting, and you actually build on those skills as you go through. So you might start as a Beaver with first aid level 2 and finish Scouts with first aid level 3 or 4, and be able to do CPR, recognise strokes and seizures and things like that, which are very, very useful later in life. And I myself, having gone through Beavers all the way to being an adult leader, I've had to use those medical skills, for example, that we've learned in at least a handful of different scenarios, which it's been very useful, I must say. And obviously the actual outcomes of this, why you want to try and achieve your bronze Chief Scouts Award, or have your child do it, or build your program around it as a leader, because it's a good sort of first couple of steps into the sort of teamwork and community spirit and all those different, that list on the right there, a sort of rounding out a young person's experience, because in school they might learn academic subjects, obviously, but scouting gives you sort of, wasn't it what I use the term scouting education for, which is everything outside of academia, things like cooking, or doing something adventurous like hiking up a mountain or something like that, and team working skills, having the ability to actually lead other young people of the same age and build those skills of sort of collaboration and being empathetic towards other people, considering their views and figuring that kind of thing out, and gradually gaining that confidence, which is so useful later in life. So these are the various different challenge badges, and I'm going to cover each of them in turn. It's worth noting here that these look very similar to the different challenge awards and challenge badges that exist in Cub Scouts and the Scout section. They use much of the same iconography, but there are more of the challenge awards in the later Chief Scouts awards. The change you'll end up seeing is the background goes from being red to a different colour, and I'm going to cover each of these awards individually now. So the first one I'm going to start with is the My World Challenge, as you see here. And one of the big parts about being a sort of a scout is to do with the community. It's basically making sure that we all contribute. Scouts do a large amount of volunteer hours. We also do a lot of conservation work as well, such as balsam bashing, which is destruction of an invasive species that is destroying Britain's canals and waterways. That's a big thing we do, things like that. And sort of fostering this community spirit is very important. I think it is lacking nowadays in a lot of aspects. A lot of people don't particularly respect various different service workers and things like that, which they really should do, because for obvious reasons. So as it says here, number one here is learning about your local community, who serves your local community. One of the things we tend to do in scouting is to do with visiting fire stations and things like that. We sometimes have police officers come around, have a little bit of a discussion about things, or nurses, doctors, things like that. If you're a beaver leader or a parent of a beaver leader and you fall into any of these categories, do make that known to your beaver leader, because potentially it may be very useful for you to come in for a couple of hours, literally, in a year, and just do a little bit of a presentation about that to the beavers and instill that sort of that spirit in them, because sometimes it's about just removing that element of mystery and showing off that police officers and such are people too. At the end of the day, they're someone's dad, they're someone's mom, whatever the case might be. So number two here is an activity in the local community. Carol singing. Worth mentioning that scouting is used to be a Christian-only organisation, but now anyone from any faith or no faith can join, as long as they follow the Scout law, which is a set of values that are sort of held by most world religions and most people without a religion, such as just be kind to other people, be trustworthy, things like that. And for example, we do carol singing and things like that, which you can opt into and out of. There is also repairing paths in nature reserves, as it says there. There's all kinds of different things we do in the community, helping out. We work with National Trust Rangers a lot to do such things as the balsam bashing I mentioned earlier. And those are all over the place. Sometimes we do fundraising with bagging up groceries and just talking to old people sometimes when doing that, which is very useful, because sometimes old people haven't talked to anybody in a while potentially, which is nice. And it's good to lighten people's hearts a little bit to see young people taking an active role in the community, which is nice. So number three here, we have take part in an activity that reflects your national sort of identity there. Excuse me. So yeah, this is fostering that sort of spirit. There's a tenet of scouting which is known as World Scouting, which is essentially that everyone belongs to a worldwide family of scouts, but everyone has their own individual culture and identity, and we all should sort of respect that and and collaborate, but realise that and sort of appreciate that we have a wide variety of differences that makes the world a much more interesting place, basically. So we have lots of national sort of things in Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland. They're very centric to those nations. Not so much in England, where it says England there. There are, for example, if I list some out, there is the Thistle Award in Scotland, which is to do with recognising Scottish culture. Only really eligible to be awarded by and to Scout Scotland, or people who are in Scotland, which is, I think, a little bit of an oversight, my personal opinion there. I think that these awards should be eligible for anyone who wants to learn about other people's cultures. There's also the Zodiac Awards in Scotland, which are similarly not really awarded outside of Scotland, but I think they're a fantastic award structure to do with basically sleeping in a number of different environments, pushing the boundaries a little bit, sleeping on boats and things, or in a traditional tent or under a canvas or whatever the case might be, which is very cool, I think, and also sleeping every month of the year, including winter, just to push hardiness a little bit there. And I've actually been in touch with some of Scout Scotland, and they sort of have said that, yeah, you can run the award scheme elsewhere, just it's when it comes to wearing the badges on uniforms that it's up to own discretion, really, because someone might call it out. But I think personally that these types of awards are, there's nothing particularly Scottish about the Zodiac Award, for example, but I think the Thistle Award is very Scottish, but as long as someone, respects that Scottish culture and actually does earn the award, I think that it doesn't matter where you're from, if you're from Northern Ireland or Wales or whatever. And I just wanted to mention that in case anyone from Scout Scotland is listening. Alternatively, Wales, they have a very, very good award scheme there called the Dragon Awards, which are eligible to be earned by anyone in the UK and worn by anyone in the UK. And that is a very similar structure to the Scottish Zodiac Award, to do with essentially sleeping in a number of different months of the year and doing a number of other things that sort of push the boundaries out a little bit. So it's an incredibly good award scheme. I think at one point Northern Ireland did have a regional award too, but not anymore, and they haven't been considering one, I don't think, because Northern Ireland's quite a small region of scouting in the UK, although a very iconic one, I must say, having been there a number of times. And finally, England doesn't have any, unfortunately, regional sort of national awards, unfortunately, really. There are some which I've been told exist, but I have not had any confirmation from Scouts headquarters about those actually existing. Apparently they don't, and any regional or county award can only be worn as an occasional badge for up to, I think, 12 months. So that's worth considering. But anyways, so if you are a Beaver Scout leader, it may be worth building one of those national awards into your program. I definitely recommend the Welsh Dragon Award, for example. It's a very easy one to start off with, and essentially that's a very good portion of this, because having that reflection on UK, and it says there dance and music or craft festivals, things like that, sort of knowing your own native culture is quite useful, especially in things such as jamborees, where lots of scouts from across the world get together, which happen a lot in the scout section and the explorer section as well. That can be very useful because scouts will exchange sort of experiences in their own countries, and it's a very interesting opportunity to express that kind of camaraderie, I'd say, because someone from Kenya is also scouting is the same as someone in the UK, for example, and then they can discuss their scouting experiences, how they differ, how they're the same, and how they all follow the same scout law for the most part and have the same values. Anyways, moving on from that, I think I've stepped on that for quite a while. 4, we have the reflection of worship, reflection of celebration there. So yeah, again, it's worth mentioning that while a good portion of people in Scouts are of a faith and can perform that act of worship, there's also people who are of no faith or of no discernible faith, or whatever the case might be, and that's why reflection or celebration also exists for secular people, and obviously there's actually, as I mentioned there in number 5, about the Beaver Promise there. So a part of being in scouting is to just do a promise essentially when you get invested, when you become an actual beaver or whatever, which is you can view them online. There's a number of different ones. They vary by religion or by no religion or whatever the case might be, but it's essentially to be kind and helpful, to uphold Scout values and Scout law, which is basically just be a good person, be trustworthy, things like that. And essentially, number 5 here is about discussing that and how it can remind you to do good things in the community. And I will say that it's a nice thing to do to sort of feel that sort of sense of community, and to know that you're in a group of other people who also want to do good things and also want to be positive role models in the future, or positive influences by being part of scouting. And that's very important, I'd say. Number 6 there is about learning about the natural world. Apologies. So pond dipping, mini beast hunting, things like that. Yeah, growing something from a seed. This is very important because environmental sustainability is a big thing we're pushing in or making people aware of in the more senior sections of scouting, such as Explorer Scouts and things like that. We're doing big things. I believe that Northern Ireland is doing some very important work on planting trees in scouting there, which I've seen, and it's very impressive, I must say. So starting this early in terms of the beaver section, etc., is quite important. And number 7 there we have take part in activity from another country. So making a dish from another country is usually the one we go for here, because learning life skills for life is a big part of scouting. We teach skills outside of what the regular academia in schools is, such as cooking and cleaning, or not particularly cleaning, but cooking and things like that. Being self-reliant, independent, wearing a uniform correctly, to emulate wearing a suit or whatever the case might be later in life. So it's all very important there, and that's an easy one to do. Moving on, we have the My Skills Challenge, which is actually one of my favourite challenges, at least for the Scout section, where it is quite comprehensive. The Skills Challenge here, okay, hang on. We have the My Skills Challenge. So the My Skills Challenge here is mostly to do with making sure you know how to be healthy. Perhaps this is something that is often taken for granted by parents in terms of how to brush teeth and look after them, foods, things of that nature. But also it's mostly to do with starting to develop some of those life skills, the skills for life that we try to instill in all sections and all levels of scouting. So as you can see here, at the very top we'll start with how sort of teaching new beavers how to play a game. This helps not just to bring new people into the fold and incentivize that, but it also helps with mentoring skills and teaching skills and leadership skills, which are useful at all levels of scouting and outside of scouting as well. Number 2 here is to do with, as I mentioned, keeping fit and healthy. So that's to do with making sure that you can cook and eat, or at least eat and recognize what is good and bad for you, why you don't have too many treats, and sweet things and other such things as that, processed meats, and then of course there a little bit about exercise, and why you should do that and why you should regularly do it. And usually beavers have football or something else that they like to do, which counts for that, obviously. Number 3 there is creating 2 different creative activities. So this is sort of rounding out those non-academic things outside of school that they may not try or learn. Starting to play a musical instrument is a very nice one to do. If someone's very into scouting, we can bootstrap into developing a musical instrument, which is quite nice. Or just something nice in terms of making a dance or painting a picture or something, which is easier to do but equally as important there. Number 4, learn a new song and sing it. Singing, is I'm sure you can do other things for this one as well, because I know I've got an awful singing voice because we didn't do any singing or anything like that in scouting. But we we foster a community of respect and understanding in scouting. So if someone is a bit warbly, I don't think that's going to matter at all. If anyone's thinking about that. Number 5 here, learning 3 different skills. I may have mentioned before, but I had a scout recently who was on a hiking camp with us, who had not been through any of the previous sections in scouting, and they actually didn't know how to tie their own shoelaces. So when we were getting everybody out to start doing a nice hike to get everyone's sort of legs going and feeling exercise and up for the day, they had their shoes undone. They were about to start a hike with their shoes loose, and I had to take a few moments discreetly with a couple of leaders just to make sure they knew and to teach that to them. And it just shows that some people can reach the age of 13 or whatever the case might be, and somehow those sorts of skills slip under the radar. So fostering that sort of self-reliance and being able to do these things by yourself is quite important, especially things that it says there about learning your own address and your parents' phone number and things like that. That's very important, because if your child doesn't know that and they get lost or whatever the case might be, it can be quite difficult sometimes them to get in touch with you and various other things. Make your bed, that's another life skill there, something you can help out, teach your kids early about how to do that, helps with the chores and things. 6 there, inventing a machine. This can just be anything. It doesn't have to be an actual functioning machine, really. It can just be a model. But it's sort of bringing people towards STEM a little bit and making that a little bit more approachable, making it so that people who may be engineers one day have a kind of chance to shine with that inventive spirit, which is very useful. And usually we get a very good response out of the people in scouting about those kinds of inventions and things. It's quite nice. Number 7, complete 2 mission-solving problems set by a leader. As you see there, it says in a team. So this is developing that leadership skills. There's those sort of beginnings, at least in the infancy of a natural leader and a good team worker. So we're starting to foster that kind of stuff and build that experience in those. And working together for problem solving as well is important, as it starts to give them an understanding of some people being better at certain things naturally, and some people perhaps needing to pair up with other people, and those people have maybe more creative skills and problem solving skills and things, and by balancing all that out, which we do as adults in the workforce and things like that as managers. Number 8 there is go somewhere new and then find out 5 facts about something new. Essentially this is sort of developing that adventurous spirit, and that's willingness to go out and actually experience the world and not be stuck behind a screen somewhere or watching TV or playing the games console, whatever it might be. And finding out 5 facts as well, because there's no use in going somewhere if you don't immerse yourself in the local culture, right? Or about going somewhere new and not learning anything about it, just sort of to say you've been there. It's worth drilling down, and sort of instilling that in them is quite important from a young age. Outdoor challenge. Obviously this is the quintessential sort of scouting skills, going outdoor. Something that some of you may consider a little bit old-fashioned. Now we have fast computers and all this kind of stuff. But actually there's lots of studies that show that going out into nature is one of the best things universally you can do for mental health and to keep your child's mental health sort of in a positive position, or more positive than it would be otherwise. I still have some friends who, when they get a bit stressed from work or whatever, they go off to a campsite for a weekend, they come back refreshed like they've been to a spa or something. So it's very good, and it gives them a better appreciation of why we have to protect nature and things like that too. Additionally, a bit of resilience, fostering that ability to sleep under canvas, perhaps in a little bit more colder conditions than usual. It helps build that resilience in people that collapse under pressure and things like that. Just slowly raising the bar as you go through the different scouting levels. So as we say here in the outdoor challenge, go on a sleepover or camp with other beavers. So A lot of the time, these camps are just day camps without going overnight, but there are some camps where beavers do, in fact, sleep overnight. Sleepovers count too, obviously with friends in a friend's house, but we do try to incentivize or emphasize sort of sleeping with people who maybe you aren't as close to, because that sort of gives people that a greater sort of spirit of being able to compromise, right? So sometimes you're going to be stuck in places with people who aren't your best friends, and you've got to use that experience to build closer relationships rather than pushing yourselves further apart. We find that in scouting they tend to build relations very quickly. From sharing a tent with 3 or 4 or 5 other people, other scouts that are the same age, and obviously the leaders are nearby just in case any need us or anything. And we help teach them how to put up a tent and things like that, as it says here, and learn sort of how to cook on a fire, something like that, which is of course transferable to a kitchen hob, things like that, and wired games, things like that, to do with coordination, navigational skills, things like that, which is very good. Setting up a tent and a sleeping bag. Oops. I consider setting up a tent and a sleeping bag to be a very important thing to learn at a young age, because it essentially boils down to the equivalent of, okay, it's on you to make sure that you're warm and you're comfortable tonight, and we're not going to do it for you. You've got to learn to do that. We'll show you how to do it, but it's on you to do that. And it's that sort of first step towards self-reliance, because they may have only ever had it when they've come home to clean beds, clean sheeting on their bed, and they just roll into it and don't care about how it got there, or don't say thank you for whatever reason or whatever the case might be. And sort of going, okay, here's the poles, here's the canvas, you do it this way, we'll watch you do it and we'll help you if you need to. It gives them that sort of, oh right, yeah, this is the actual amount of work that my mum and dad have to go through, to make my bedding or whatever the case might be, and they learn those skills themselves and it sticks with them. Number 2, okay, 3 simple knots. Again, this is something that maybe is as it says there, 3 simple knots. As it says there, tie 3 simple knots. So this is something that is situationally useful, but really it's not about the knot, it's about the process of learning it. A lot of times we find that the scouts have their own individual ways of learning, as you may know from academia or whatever. Not everyone learns the same way. And by giving them this and observing closely and sort of pointing things out to them, we can actually help them realize how they learn. Do they learn from watching someone else do it? Do they learn from reading instructions? Do they learn from having someone sort of talk them how to do it slowly, or from collaborating with other people on the same knot and sort of like being a more of a leadership type role there? There's lots of different ways to do it, and of course some knots are very useful in life. There's obviously the tying a shoelace, the overhand bow and things like that, but there are other ones which are very, very useful, like the clove hitch, which is more of a hitch than a knot, but that would count. That's how you secure things to a sort of a fixed structure that you can't get the rope around very easily. And another good one would be, for example, the reef knot. It's a very useful knot. It's a very strong way to tie a knot, and it lies flat. So for things like slings, if your friend breaks an arm on a playground or something, it'd be very useful. So number 3 there is show you what you know what to do when someone has an accident, and a little bit in regards to first aid and why you tell adults and what you tell adults about accidents. So one of the things that every scout will learn almost universally before they leave scouting is a lot about first aid, because first aid is one of the most important life skills you can have, because you can realistically save someone's life even with a very small amount of first aid knowledge. So we teach, for example, at level 3 first aid, we teach what would be considered a first responders course. So that's a lot of recognizing strokes and seizures, being able to patch up cuts, to do CPR, a lot of useful things and life skills in relation to that, how to disinfect a wound. So I myself, having been all the way from Beavers up to an adult leader, I've had to use my first aid skills more than a handful of times, and I would not have known them if it wasn't for Scouts. So we start early on that. Number 4 here, take part in activities such as something natural. Again, building that sort of understanding of the natural world and why it's important. Actually getting your hands dirty as opposed to learning it as a sort of like academic subject where it's sort of out there in the ether. It's like this is a tree. This is this type of tree. It has, for example, ash dieback is a big thing right now in the UK, and why that's such a big thing for the ecology of the UK, and why we have to help preserve those trees essentially. Number 5, animal identification. This is useful essentially about, again, learning about not just ecology in general, the fact there is ecosystems, but in your local community, why we have badgers, why we have ferrets, why we have these birds of prey, how to identify a buzzard versus a kestrel or whatever the case might be, and why they're important to the ecology of the area. A good one as well is things like sharks, so Shark Week. A lot of people are scared of sharks, but in reality sharks are less likely to kill you than vending machines are, for example, and they're a very important part of the ecosystem, and a lot are critically endangered due to things like shark finning for Chinese shark fin soup and things, so it's good to make them aware of issues, basically, just to open up that door a little bit. So number 6 here, we have make something to help animals in the wild. So again, this is sort of old enough at this stage to make their first step into making an actual difference and a physical difference to the benefit of the community. Building something like a bird box or a bug hotel is not difficult, especially if there's no nails and things involved. It's just slotting things together a lot of the time, and that can be a big difference basically. And then being able to put that in the backyard, for example, or to put it in a community space is nice, because then they can come back, they can see birds moved in there, and that's why we can have a physical difference from very little effort to our environment. My adventure, so this is more sort of quintessential Scout stuff, and it's more about pushing the boundaries, trying new things, being adventurous, because if you are timid and shy, that's useful in some aspects of life, but equally you need to be able to, when it comes down to it, try new things with other people. So we try and build that. So number 1 here, as it says there, adventurous activities. So all of this, most of this, I would say, not all of it, is done in-house in Scouting. Archery, we can do that in-house a lot of the time. Some of these other things, climbing, bouldering, there are sometimes Scout camps that have these that we can organise, or you can ask your local district, if for example, if you're a Scout leader, about organising these. But equally, for all the other ones, we can organise that quite easily in Scouting to sort of bring the Scouts out to these different activities and try something new. At a Beaver Scouting level, it's quite timid stuff, but again, it is that first step of going, okay, this is an actual bow, an arrow, and we're teaching you how to be responsible with it, how to be safe with it, why you should use it, and why it's such a good tool for self-improvement. Because archery is a very good example, actually, because in school a lot of the time sports you learn are all team-based sports, right? They're all about, oh yeah, run ahead, be very physically fit. And there's some people, like myself for example, who never really got too into things like football, because there were always people who were picked first and things like that, and it could be a bit disheartening. Whereas things like archery is something I've done for a very long time, and I'm actually an instructor for that in Scouting. And I find that archery is a very different ball game, because, well, a ball game, but it is a physically, not a physically demanding sport, but it is very mentally demanding, in the sense that you are facing your own personal best. and it is all skills based. It is all that you can do a better technique, a more consistent technique. It's all about, it's on you. You can't blame it on anybody else that you're not doing as well or whatever. Well, you could be better. And I think that's something that we try to try to branch out a little bit, our scouts and our Beaver scouts, etc., into these different ways of thinking and doing sports and different experiences, essentially. Number 2 there, we have 6 other outside activities. Following a trail, again, this applies as well to other aspects of life. Because if you're in a city you're not familiar with, for example, you may have to navigate that and avoid any rough areas, things like that. So it all comes together that way. Building a den, again, this is about self-reliance and applying practical skills that you've learned about knots and whatever the case might be, to actually build something and see you've built something with your hands, with instruction from the leaders to make sure you're safe, obviously, the site. But at the end of the day, it's something physical that you've built, which actually for a lot of people with attention disorders and things like that can be very, very important and can give a lot of satisfaction. And of course, there's a few other things there: building structures, water games, something again we promote a lot in scouting, because they're very good ways to get people out in the elements in a safe way. Number 3 there is a ramble or nature walk with a purpose. So this might be learning about ecological conservation, environmental conservation, or for example some kind of a small hike that beavers are able to undertake and sort of just push the boundaries a little bit there and challenge them in a positive way. And number 4 is the Green Cross Code. So this is just making sure that if they didn't already have that instilled within them, that some very basic safety things are useful regardless in life, about how to cross a road and look both ways and make sure that you're not going to run out into traffic when you see a friend, whatever the case might be. Team working challenge. This is the first real team working award anywhere in these early sections in squirrels or in beavers, and as you can see here, it's a quite easy one to award basically, but essentially it's to do with participating in team games in a positive way. You may not be the best at something, but as long as you are contributing your effort towards it, that's the main point of team working, right? Finding your niche. So to do with when we organise beavers, we tend to put them into groups and sort of subgroups within scouting of maybe 4 or 5, and we tend to designate sort of a leader amongst those, and sort of a co-leader. I forget what the official terms are, but it is useful essentially to develop those sort of team working and leadership skills there. As it says further down, just show that you are a helpful team member and you're a good friend, and being a leader in an activity as well, so that you have that sort of sense of how to lead people, that first trial, let's say, of what your leadership style is and how you will flex to the role, because some people take very naturally to being a leader, even if they've never had the chance before, which is quite interesting to see. And the personal challenge here, which is all about basically your own personal challenge, whatever that means to you. And this sort of personal challenge is a theme that runs throughout all the scouting sections. So here we can see a little bit about the important thing is that it's something that can be agreed on with your leader, so it's conformed to what is found challenging by you, the individual person. So other awards and things out there may be more sort of, this is concrete what you have to do, but some people may be very well inclined physically but not so much academically, or maybe very inclined creatively but not so much in other aspects, whatever. And it's about building on those weaker areas basically. As it says there, you might be looking after a new beaver if you want to develop social skills, things like that. Maybe if you're wanting to learn a bit more academically, you can talk about the topic you're interested in and learn more about it. There's some of the good things there about if you've got some difficulties in keeping orderly at school, then Beavers and Cubs and Scouts are very good for that, and we try to sort of help them realise that actually it's down to them how people perceive them, and if they want to be a disruptive influence, that's a choice. It's not something that they're forced into. A lot of times I just help them, and obviously there's other bits and pieces here about how trying all the food on a Beaver sleepover, things like that. Because some people, especially I see nowadays with Scouts, is that they aren't very adventurous with their food, which I think is, we all know about eating healthy and things like that, and obviously more variety is better in your food. And not only that, but later in life when you visit different places in the world, they may not have that particular food that you've only learned to like, basically, and you need to try new things then, and it's very good, this challenge award here. Personal challenge. So the important part of the personal challenge, which is one of the more important challenge awards, is the personal challenge, because it's down to the individual. It's not really a set challenge, because some people may be very inclined physically, for example, and making a physical challenge may not make the most sense if they're very inclined that way. And similarly, if someone is academically inclined but maybe not so much creatively inclined, then it could be good to round them out, to put in their sort of abilities and things a little bit, to think a little bit more about the things they may be lacking in, which is very useful. So as you can see here, that sort of self-reflection is an important life skill. A lot of people, even adults, lack a lot of self-reflection, and being able to sort of look at themselves and go, I'd like to improve this part of myself. And that's something that we help them try to learn to do in scouting, and sort of that just helps them to be better people later in life and have that ability to be self-reflective without getting upset for doing it or things like that, or avoid those self-reflections. And obviously reflecting in on yourself is a very good way to counter any problems or issues that may be undetected otherwise. So there's some here that are, for example, if you're not particularly academically inclined, then maybe that point B there about learning a new topic. People who are less socially adept may find it useful to look after a beaver for a term and just be their friend for a while. Learn how to do that, it's very useful. Point E there is also quite important there, about good behaviour. One of the things we try to teach kids in scouting is that being a disruptive influence is a choice, and it's something that maybe isn't conveyed a lot at school. There may be teachers that just don't have the time for a child, and that's why they're being a disruptive influence, whatever the case might be. And obviously, leaders, we aren't child psychologists, but we do our best with helping out. We have more ability to do that because it's a smaller size than in school, and a lot of leaders have decades of experience with scouting and utilising that. Sometimes I've seen in my scouting time, even as a leader in the past few years, where someone who's been a disruptive influence, has had a bit of a chat with a scout leader once or twice or whatever, and they've realised actually that being a disruptive influence is a choice, and that oftentimes just performing in a positive way gets them the same amount of attention without all the negative emotions and things like that. So it can be quite useful. And of course, some other things in here about trying all the food on a beaver sleepover. So that's a very useful one, because I find that nowadays a lot of people are very picky with their food, even adults, and I think that makes you less able to have a very balanced diet, really. And you may be in situations in the future where you don't have access to that particular food that you are so reliant on, and then you essentially starve yourself for no reason, etc., whatever the case might be. So having that ability to experience new things is very important there, to not be afraid of new food and new experiences. And obviously, if you visit a foreign country or somewhere new, then you want to be able to try their local cuisine and experience that for yourself. And of course, for the final requirement for the Chief Scouts Bronze Award, you have to have a certain number, as it said on the first slides there, of activity badges, which are the ones in yellow you see here. Stage badges also, I believe, count for this, which are those blue ones. And those stage badges actually stick with you and progress through the levels throughout scouting. So as you go from a Beaver Scout to a Cub Scout, you may increase your emergency aid from level 1 to level 2, for example, or nights away if you're going on camps and things like that. But as you can see, there's a wide variety of different Beaver badges here, all the way from safety to money skills, which is a very useful one there. Campcraft, collector, communicator, disability awareness. These are all very useful different badges to learn, and you just have to have a number of these, which tend to be able to be earned in a night or two. Money skills there is a very useful one. It's a very new one, but a lot of people aren't taught that in schools, obviously, and a lot of people's parents potentially may not know particularly a lot about money skills and why you have current accounts and saving accounts and you have pensions and things. So a little bit of an introduction at Beavers, but I guess more in depth later on through Cubs and Scouts. So I hope you've learned a little bit about the Chief Scouts Bronze Award there, and about how to achieve it, and what you can actually hope to gain. Thank you.